Kathmandu, they're quite often buildups in clouds, and they can develop into thunderstorms or cumulonimbus type clouds. And their suspicion was maybe there was some sort of cloud like that on the approach.
This is everything from the time of the accident.
Investigators examine weather conditions throughout the flight. The report was cloudy with a potential for storms. But because the crew had deviated around bad weather,
Kathmandu, Pakistan 268. We are 10 to 15 miles right of track to avoid a buildup en route.
it's unlikely they then flew into a thunderstorm. By now, the team has ruled out all possible external factors for this accident.
Flaps were out, engines spinning, no intruder, no serious weather on approach.
They're left with only one conclusion.
He must not have known that they were flying too low. Clear for finals, runway 02.
Runway 02.
Next altitude is 6,800 at 8 miles. Now crossing through 7,500, 7,400.
What's happening? No!
It's clear in this situation that the pilots have built up a picture of the outside world that is not true and accurate, which leads to the crash. However, we have to ask questions why that may be.
Investigators look into two possibilities for the flight's dangerously low altitude.
Either they ignored their chart and were doing a visual approach, or they somehow misread the chart.
Nothing else makes sense.
We had no way of knowing why it was too low. So that became a matter of studying the data and having a general roundtable discussion.
All right, let's start with the visual approach.
Roger, Pakistan 268, report 10 miles.
Roger, call you at 10 miles, Pakistan 268.
We can save some time by going visual. Watch my speed. We should soon see the runway.
On a visual approach, pilots fly based almost entirely on what they can see.
Yes, Commander. Visual to runway 02.
Rather than a predetermined route.
Flaps 10.
Flaps 10.
Flaps 15.
Flaps 15.
In many instances, visual landings are easier for pilots,
Watch for the runway.
but with a greater risk of human error.
What's happening? No!
It's possible, but almost total cloud coverage throughout the entire approach. Plus, they knew the terrain. The captain made this approach at least 7 times. The first officer 5.
Investigators conclude it's highly unlikely the flight crew attempted a visual approach in thick clouds.
It's a complicated arrival. It requires a step down at various points toward the runway threshold. And perhaps most significantly, the meteorological conditions were not conducive to a visual approach.
Pakistan 268, report 16 miles.
The only theory left is that the pilots somehow misinterpreted their approach chart.
Sierra approach, Commander.
Here it is. Watch my levels.
Everything was working technically. There didn't appear to be any interference on the flight deck by anyone. And so the only conclusion that we can take from this is that for some reason, the pilots had clearly misinterpreted data.
All right, let's look at this.
Investigators hope the flight's black box data, back from Paris, will help solve the mystery. They look at the plane's flight path as the crew prepares for landing.
They started their descent. At 16 miles out, they're at 10,500 feet. Then down to 9,500 at 13 miles. 8,200 at 10 miles. Then quickly down to 7,500 until impact at 7,280.
The data reveals an astonishing fact.
So, 1,000 feet too low, right from the get-go.